Hi, I'm Seraphlor, and welcome to yet another video. Wuthering Waves patch 2.7 is out now, and I want to give my thoughts on the story. Let's begin. To say that patch 2.7's story is amazing is putting it lightly. It's peak. Cinema even. What a send-off to Renacita that leaves no stone unturned. We got to see the characters we've come to know and love together in the face of a national crisis. We got to see returning villains we thought we'd either wouldn't see yet or many believed to be gone forever. And we get to see Rover at her limit, reaching their breaking point when all hope is lost, only for someone to be their saving light in the dark, and in turn, they're able to become the same for everyone else. It's great stuff. And I fear many people are going to miss out because of their own childish hangups on Wuthering Waves' story. But anyway, let's get over what I liked, what I didn't like, and what expectations we should have for 3.0. Let's start with part 1 of the story. We find ourselves in Raguna and are experiencing the same nightmares that the citizens have had. They find themselves in Leviathan's journeying paradise, just outside along the river Styx. The details are different per person, but for Rover, they see the fading bodies of their allies as Cristoforo's voice echoes their fates and follies, and as they travel further, Rover is abruptly kicked out by the illusion of Galbrina. It's a nice introduction and premonition of things to come, and how we aren't done with the Fraxidus just yet. Also, it is good to see Brant and Rochia again, as they are traveling through Raguna, putting on shows to lift everyone's spirits. Let's move on to the thing I want to talk about next, Cardathia's supposed death. The way it was handled would have been very poor if it weren't for Rover taking the time to rationally think about the situation and how odd it was, echoing what most of the audience felt. This helps turn her death into mystery that we keep in the back of our minds throughout the story. Now, let's talk about Avidius, as I believe he's the standout in part 1, and maybe even part 2 as well. Avidius comes to Raguna to assist in hunting down tide spawns, and finds himself assisting with the evacuation of Raguna to Arvarado Vault. Throughout working with him and eventually Galbrina, we at first believed that he could be the new harbinger of the Dark Tide, and track him down to Thessalio Fells after we speak with Imperator's recording in the Compass. But after an emotional battle with Avidius, helping him realize that yes, even though his life is a fabrication, he can still become a hero. Avidius removes his own tacit cord and dies in his creator, Cristoforo's arms. Avidius was a man who was nothing more than Cristoforo's fabricated protagonist, made to follow a script his creator set out for him. However, even after Avidius discovered his life was a lie, he tried desperately to carve out his own fate. In the end, he had almost surrendered to the fate, but through discovering Galbrina's past and how she fought against fate herself, it gave him the final push he needed to break free from the Dark Tide, at the cost of his existence. Avidius is the type of character you don't see a lot in gacha games. The kind of character you find in Final Fantasy or Xenoblade, and that's what elevates him beyond a lot of the playable cast in my opinion. His death in Fate really makes you want to defeat Cristoforo, and not let him get away with his psychotic desires for tragedy. At the end of part 1, we learn the truth. After being baited by an illusion from Leviathan and having to be saved by Galbrina, we learn that Rover is actually the new harbinger of the Dark Tide. This puts things into perspective, as Galbrina was incredibly secretive and never explained her intentions to us fully. She had her suspicions that we were the next harbinger after Abby had absorbed all those Dark Tide frequencies in Murderstown, and her suspicions were proven correct. This is why Galbrina was so secretive about her motives. She knew that Leviathan had a grip on the Rover's mind, and any details told about the plan she made with Cardathia would tip Leviathan off. I've seen a lot of discussion online about Galbraina not telling Rover anything and treating it as a flaw of the story. When in context, with what we know, it makes perfect sense. Let's move on to part 2, or Act 11. This act was top tier as well. We get to see Yuno and Augusta again, and hey, Lupa's here too. See? The developers didn't forget about her after all. There's one part that's a little slow paced, but we'll get to it. What I liked about this part was how well the game showed how dire the situation was when we got onto the battlefield to assist the gladiators. It really felt like Leviathan was more than just a force of nature, and that it would come up with complex strategies and plans when it wants to. It is here that our allies from Raguna arrive to save the gladiators of Septimont, along with assistance from the Black Shores. It is here I want to talk about a weird oddity with the story. For whatever reason, they introduced pre-rendered in-engine cutscenes. Maybe it was to save processing power for displaying a large crowd of characters, or maybe it was a new technique they wanted to try. But either way, the cutscenes were spotty at best, off-putting at worst due to how poor the lip-syncing was. Now, I played with the English dub, so the lip-syncing was really off. I'm sure it was seamless and unintrusive for the original Chinese dub, however. Whatever the case may be with these cutscenes, it's clear that this is yet another one of Kuro's experiments with how they tell their stories. I'm going to go slightly out of order to talk about Shuyuan, who shows up after Galbraina departs for the Journeying Paradise. He's a very cool character, one that Wuwa has needed. The game was in need of cool, hype moments and aura tier male characters, and Shuyuan definitely fits that description. However, I do have qualms about his kit, but that's neither here nor there. He arrives on the battlefield in Septimont to give us Fenrico's lantern, and tells us what came of him. He also tells us he's in pursuit of Scar, and when Scar arrives, the battle against him and Shuyuan was cinema, especially when our allies arrive on the scene in order to surround and ambush Scar together. I'm looking forward to Choyuan's quest when his banner is live. I also hope we get more hype moments and aura type characters like him as well. People consistently say male characters don't sell, but they usually do if they fit in that archetype of the deep-voiced, edgy-looking badass. Even the most staunch waifu lovers can't help but pull them. Rover eventually makes the descent to the Journeying Paradise to catch up with Galbraina and activate Augusta's Waystone that was swallowed by the Dark Tide. This will allow our allies to follow us without Dark Tide corruption, but unfortunately this segment has a lot of pacing issues, stemming entirely from a rehash of Galbraina's past that we were already made aware of thanks to Murmurstown. But we have to experience it again for some reason. I appreciated showing her side of the ordeal, but it doesn't make it any less uninteresting since we've heard it all before. It could have wrapped up in a single scene showing the gladiator she beats and her corruption by the Dark Tide. Either way, it went on for too long. The rest of the Journeying Paradise section was cinema though. On the outside, Scar attacks like I mentioned, but to the surprise of everyone, his attack was a distraction for Furlova to unleash the Dark Tide on the surface and upon our allies. In the Journeying Paradise we meet Karen, whom we assume was a creation of the Journeying Paradise ferry across the water, allowing Galbraina and Rover to find the Waystone Augusta left behind. Charon, however, reveals himself to be the grand architect of the Fraxidus, Schwarzlock, in disguise. He attacks Rover and Galbraina, destroying the Waystone. Now, our allies lost in the Dark Tide cannot find their way back anymore. Galbraina tells Rover to go on ahead while she stays behind to deal with the Grand Architect. This is the type of tension and desperation we needed to see more of in Wuthering Waves. We needed to see Rover feel the pressure of the situation more often, and we got it in spades here. From seeing visions of our friends suffering in the illusions of the Dark Tide to our confrontation with Cristoforo. Cristoforo reveals that not everything went according to plan, but he has been able to make adjustments to his script. He continues to taunt the Rover, all while Abby was suffering, making us question what Abby actually is. Cristoforo continues to show that he's one of the best antagonists in Gacha, and at the end of their conversation, he triggers the Dark Tide, trapping Rover in their own mind and fears. Galbrina eventually turns the tables on the Grand Architect and defeats him, making it straight for us. In rather awesome first-person section, Galbrina finds Rover suspended in a mass of Dark Tide energy, unable to get to them. She uses her power and overclocks, and despite the gamble, she makes it into Rover's mindscape. This part was incredible, as it's revealed that the Rover's mindscape was the title screen we've been logging in from since day one. What an impressive way to tie things together. I hope Kuro doesn't abandon the mindscape concept and we come back here again. Maybe as some mental battle against an enemy, or have it be used for some important character moment for Rover like it did here. Rover truly thought that this was over, and that all hope was lost. Their friends dead and consumed, left to wander in this seemingly lonely place forever. But thanks to Galbrina, Rover is able to regain their fighting spirit and courage to keep moving forward. It's thanks to that newfound hope that our friends and allies are able to find their way back to them, to save them from the emergence of Scar and Furlova. Skipping ahead to the final battle against Leviathan was nothing short of epic, despite the fact that, disappointingly, Leviathan was a fleur-de-lis reskin. It makes sense in lore, and I suppose they didn't want us to fight some big, cumbersome target, but still, I think they could have worked something out. Regardless, it doesn't change the fact that the final battle was sick, and the revelations kept coming with Abby, or Abraxas, seemingly used to be a Threnodian, or a Threnodian adjacent creature, as Leviathan demanded to know why they betrayed us. We're also reminded from the Fraxinus aura farming from above that they had a connection with Rover, as they used to be their waystones. The story ends with the repairs for Ragunna and Septimon. The Fraxton is planning their next step to Lahairoi, and Galbrina joining the Black Shores. Now, I skipped over a few things, but this video is long enough, and so is this script. It's about 11k words, and for a video from me, it's pretty crazy. So I'll wrap things up here. 2.7 was just a story everyone needed. An epic finale to the Renacida arc that involved all of the playable cast, and a few side NPCs we didn't expect to see again, or be relevant beyond their introductions. To me, this conclusion was satisfying and gratifying, and I couldn't have it any other way. So, my hat's off to you, Kuro Games. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked the video, give it a like and subscribe if you haven't. I'll see you all next time. Later.